Hello, and welcome again to another edition of Adaptation's video interview series. I'm Bret Rachlin, and I'm today joined by Jake Dorow, a good friend of mine, as well as a client of mine who has an extensive background in marketing. Welcome, Jake.
Hey Brett, how you doing? It's good
Do-
to be on and good to see your face.
yeah, doing great. Thank you, and really looking forward to this conversation. We've gotten
Yeah,
to know each other
likewise.
really well over the past year, and it's been really interesting just learning really about your career trajectory and also just even your paths from Ohio to Atlanta to now Montgomery, Alabama. And so first off, talk a little bit about your career evolution. How has your career evolved from a marketing standpoint and all the positions you've had over the past 10 years?
Boy, that's a really good question because I feel like I have a bit of a unique background. I went to school at a small college in Ohio. It's in Portsmouth, Ohio, called Shawnee State, and I grew up loving sports so much. Like sports was, 100% focus. I played college baseball. I played high school golf. I played football when I was younger. So sports was always a big part of my life. And as I evolved into getting a little older, I saw career paths in sports, and I always wanted to be involved in sports. So I picked up a job with a local newspaper covering Friday night high school games, and I thought that was a blast. So between writing and keeping track of stats, I was a bit of a stats geek. I could probably name every NBA champion dating back until like 1980. So I'm a big stats geek, and between the combination of writing and stats, being involved with the teams and the coaches and athletes, I found a career path in sports information and communication. So, I started at my college, Shawnee State. I was a student assistant, helping out the SID there. The SID, when I say SID, it's Sports Information Director. And then from there, I got an internship with Bowling Green in Bowling Green, or I should say Bowling Green State University. I'm sorry, in Bowling Green, Ohio. I don't want to misquote the Falcons there, but I was covering the ice hockey team there. Lots of good stories there. I'm sure we'll kind of dive in there, but cover the ice hockey team there, and then eventually moved down to Atlanta to work with Kennesaw State with the football and baseball program. So it was a lot of digital work, social media, a lot of PR, writing, website maintenance, video work, stat keeping, you name it. Yeah, I probably did it. Press box management, working with the radio teams and TV talent as well. So a lot involved in those positions. Nothing but respect for those people that are still in the field. It was quite an experience I'll never forget. Something that I loved doing for about 8 years, and then. To kind of go from there, I took what I loved from doing that field and turned it into more of a marketing career. And I then transferred over to a corporate setting at the Impact Partnership in Kennesaw, Georgia, working in their digital department with social media, paid advertising, email marketing, automation. And really from there, I kind of just took off and was self-taught on a lot of things. And I landed with a company now called BankTel. It's a SaaS tech company, and we focus on banks and credit unions. So, one thing led to another, a bit of a unique path to where I am now, but nothing but, I'm very grateful for, what's been come my way for my career so far.
Well, that's a great description of your career evolution, Jake, and I really appreciate that. And it's awesome to hear your communications and PR and a sports information director at heart. I just the fact that you corrected yourself about Bowling Green State University. Early on in your career, you had to be so exacting when you were providing statistics or names
Yeah.
of players to newspapers or other media. It's nice to see you still have that in you. And since I have had some of that background myself, especially from a PR perspective, I really get that and appreciate that. And as we've talked about before, obviously, and previous people who have been interviewed as part of this series who know me really well know I'm a stat geek as well. So we could have a whole separate conversation just about that, but
Oh yeah.
we
Oh
won't go there at this moment.
yeah.
But what was also interesting to me, there's a lot to cover, I think, from a perspective of of from your career standpoint. And but one thing that we really hadn't talked about in the past that I do want to bring up right now, especially because the focus of these interviews is really around how you adapt to changes successfully. And you mentioned your sports background in terms of from a playing sports perspective. And I think it's actually something I haven't really addressed really in some of the other interviews. How would you say that playing sports, especially going into college up to that level, has helped you adapt to changes? What did you learn from playing sports that has helped you in your career and other areas of your life adapt to changes?
Well, I think right off the bat, while I think about the question is every day is a little different. I mean, you get into a routine, work or playing as part of a team. You get in a routine, so you wake up in the morning, you have a morning workout. Like in college, we had a swimming workouts in the morning, which is a hilarious story. But I could get tons of funny stories about how terrible of a swimmer I am, and those workouts. That was quite interesting. I bet my head coach that coached me at the time, if we called him right now, he would still tell stories about some of my swimming capabilities. But that's for a different day, I guess. But you get in a routine, so you have a morning workout. I mean, you eat breakfast, you go to classes, you go to the training room, get stretched out, and kind of loosen up before you go out to practice, and then you practice, and then you go to study hall. So that's a routine, but you're adapting every day because you're going through a routine where there are certain days where maybe there's something thrown off, so if there's a storm come in, you gotta move your practice inside, or maybe a class is moved to a different time or delayed. Like there's all these different changes that are thrown your way as a student athlete. Even like coming up with a job, you got to have a job to have some money. So it's like how you're fitting in all these pieces: homework, classes, training, practices, and you're adapting to that schedule. And then like if something is thrown off your way, you have to adapt your entire day to that change. So even little things like that, you don't realize the skills that you develop early on when you're going through these daily routines where if something's thrown off, you have to adapt your entire day. And I think a lot of people don't like changes because they like routine. So I know you and I have talked about it before, is like people like being comfortable, but for me, being a student athlete, you have to be uncomfortable to be comfortable. And
Absolutely. I think you just hit the nail on the head too about the fact that you talked about a lot of little things that you kind of did to kind of adapt to those changes from day in and day out. And I think that's oftentimes what's missing for people, especially when they get into their work environments, and they do get comfortable in their routines. And what a lot of those little changes that you had to make and adapt to kind of taught you resilience. And
oh yeah, definitely.
we've talked about resilience as being an important component of helping you adapt to change as well.
And
And I've had this premise that you can practice aspects of resilience, and what you were really doing in that was really practicing those things almost daily, because you could have revolted. I mean, you could have said, "I don't want to go inside for practice," and you may have done that a little bit in your head and maybe a little bit in your gut, but you reworked your day, you reframed, and got into the mindset, and it was your mindset that said, "Oh, I'm going to go work this out. I need to do practice indoors. I need to then still get to my study hall. What are the impacts of these changes going to have on my day?" I think that's been a great lesson, I'm sure, for you for the rest of
oh
your life and career.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because that I didn't realize it at the time when I was a student athlete, is all those skills, and you get into a daily routine and those changes that took effect into I took those skills that I learned, so to speak, and applied it to my career. Because even early on in sports, in my career in sports, those long days I had as student athletes almost kind of trained me in a way, if you want to say it that way, for those long days in my career. I mean, working in sports, people don't realize it until you actually are in it, how long those days are and how much of a grind it is. Like, for example, for the football team I was working with at Kennesaw State, on game days on Saturdays, I would get to the stadium at 8 a.m. For a noon kickoff. And then, I'd stay till 8, 9, maybe 10 p.m. at night, and even if flip it around, if you have a 7 p.m. kickoff, you still getting there around 10 a.m. and you're leaving at, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, because you got to let press write their stories afterwards, and you got to clean up. And there's a lot of things that people don't realize. You're there probably 4 or 5 hours after the game ends, because you still have to do press conferences, interviews,
Right.
writing stories, sending out stats, helping out the media that's there covering your team. So those long days.
You mean it's not all glamorous, just hobnobbing with the players? It sounds like
well,
real work, Jake.
Don't get me wrong. It's a very fun career. Don't get me wrong. It's, you get to, and kind of the counterbalance all those long days is you get close with, your coaches. You're sitting at a dinner table with the coaches and student athletes on the road, and you're having conversations with them, and you're getting to know them. Like, there's so many cool stories that, and so many cool, like, awesome people that I've met, student athletes that came from Hawaii before, that I met and talked to him about Hawaii. Like, I've traveled to Alaska a couple of times.
Right.
There's just so many cool stories that you take away from that career. I could never forget it. And, very grateful to be a part of it for 8 years.
But that really all prepared you for, being in technology. And as you know, I've been in technology, marketing, or communications my whole career. And I've worked, with startups. I've worked with large companies. I've worked for, a public company in technology, very hard driving, a lot of type A personalities. And, working, sometimes you have a lot of late nights. There are things you have to get done. Sometimes you have to be working in the middle of the night because you're at a trade show or something like that. All of that work you put in sports certainly has prepared you to be able to dig deep when you're working, for Bangtel now, and having to, put extra effort around a conference or around an event that you're planning or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think those long hours, now when I got the job at Impact Partnership, so that was the first job I had outside of sports. So it was in March of 2018 is when I was hired at the Impact Partnership. And, my first week I was kind of going in and, I remember, so it's five, I think they got off at 5:30 when I was there. So 5:30 rolled around and I'm still sitting in my chair, like working, cause I'm just used to it, and people, are like, you go home, like it's 5:30. And it was just a different mindset. So I'm, I go in at 8:30, I have an hour lunch, I get off at 5:30.
Right.
But I was kind of like implementing and integrating like the skill set that I enjoyed the most, taking away from sports. So that the transition from sports to the corporate setting, that was a financial marketing agency. So I was working in the digital department, and I was, at the time when I first started there, I was in charge of pretty much paid ads from the Facebook side. And I did a little bit of email marketing. And of course, over the time I was there, I had a couple promotions, and my skill set and demand was kind of increased a little bit. But when I was first there, it was mainly like social media, and that's something that I really enjoyed working in sports. And so I just made that transition very easily because I already had like the skill set there from working in sports, but I just was doing it in a different setting now. Instead of covering a student athlete, I was covering social media for a financial advisor. So that was
Right.
the biggest difference.
But one of the things I think you told me before is that you also needed to, learn some new things as you transition from, sports information to, corporate marketing and in that setting.
Definitely.
Discuss a little bit about how, having a focus on continuously learning and learning new things has really made that transition easier, and probably even the transition from there to Bangtel easier. Talk a little bit about your learning focus.
Yeah, so I was still considered pretty raw when I was hired at the Impact Partnership, because what they were looking for is a full on like digital like person that can come in and do, the automation and the paid ads and email marketing, CRM database management. This type of stuff was relatively new to me. Like I knew how to handle like website maintenance and social media from an organic standpoint, but in terms of like running paid ads, I had to be trained on that stuff. And my boss at the time, her name was Raquel, who I still think very highly of. And she was like the first one that took a chance on me outside of like the sports setting. She took me in and she trained me from the ground up, and she taught me how to do Facebook ads. She taught me how to handle email marketing, automation. We were using Infusionsoft at the time, Salesforce, and then eventually I got into like Pardot and some other like Zapier, some other automation tools. But in terms of like learning this stuff, I really like there was only so much time during a day that when someone can train you, and the rest is up to you. And so like my mindset is always like I can accomplish whatever I want. I just have
Mhm.
there's so many tools out there that you can learn from. And I'm a visual person, so I like to see everything. I'm not big on reading because I don't really retain the information very well if I
Mhm.
read it. But if I watch videos, then I can follow it step by step on the application I'm actually using. So what I did is I just hopped on YouTube, and I should really pay YouTube money for how much I've learned on there. But YouTube was like my go-to. I would go on YouTube, and for instance, I would look up. So maybe if I was building a month-long automated like email campaign for a client, so I would go on YouTube and like research how to build a month-long email nurture or something like that. Then a bunch of videos would pop up. I would watch them, and then like I would take notes and say, "Oh, this is a good idea," and then I would apply that to the application that I was actually working within. So a lot of YouTube videos. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. There's so many online certification classes now that you can take and go through maybe a 2 or 3 week course that you can take that involves video. So that was pretty much like how I did it. I was self-taught on a lot of things, a lot of video watching and a lot of note taking.
Well, that's a great lesson for our audience, Jake, and it's been a consistent theme throughout some of these other interviews in terms of being able to learn continuously. But what's really important about a couple of the things that you said is one is that self-taught. Okay, you could have stopped at just getting help from your boss at the time and kind of muddled through and done the best you could, and I'm sure you would have gotten to the point you are probably maybe doing that over time, but you really accelerated your path to having success in your role because you did take the initiative, and that's proactive. And I think that to really successfully adapt to changes on a consistent basis, one must be proactive, and you really exhibited
Exactly.
there. The other thing, marketing is, you've touched on some really interesting technologies. You've mentioned a number of CRM and marketing automation tools and automation integration tools like Zapier and all of those types of things. Marketing is a constant learning process these days. And
Sure is.
how would you say how would you say that you're consistently keeping up with the not only the technology changes but also within your organization in terms of the ways you can communicate and market with your prospects and customers, because once you get good at something, human nature says that you're going to just I'm going to rely on these tools, and we know that buyers, our target buyers, our prospects, our customers, the noise level is extremely high, and we have to find creative ways to engage with them. And so, how are you consistently keeping yourself, motivated, and also thinking through how you're going to change proactively to reach them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I just think about right off the top of my head is, between March of 2018 when I first got hired at Impact until right up to today where I'm working at Banktel. So that's really it's been about 3 years now, and this is my fourth job title between two companies. So I had three job titles with Impact, and then of course like I got hired at Banktel
Mhm.
in November. Now, as I think about each role, every role that I held, there was different there was different things I had to do or accomplish. So, like, I was a digital marketing coordinator to begin with at Impact, then I was a social media manager, and then a marketing automation manager. So, every single one of those titles and promotions, I had to do something different. So, when I got comfortable at the digital marketing coordinator position, they said, "Hey, we want to have you, be more involved in social media." And then I had to come up with a whole entire like social media content planning, offering to our clients where, every month we're posting so many organic posts to your pages, and we're going to drive numbers, and we're going to drive traffic to your pages. So I had to come up with that strategy. Then the marketing automation came into play. I introduced Zapier, and we were using a platform at the time called LeadJig, and there was a big like manual process that was causing a lot of human error. And I was like, well, there's got to be a better way to do it. That's like one thing I've always said to myself, no matter how comfortable you get. I've always said there's got to be a better way. And it's kind of funny. This is kind of going off track here, but dating way back when I was a college student, I was an intern for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavs, he actually invited all the interns for that semester to, excuse me, to Detroit for a presentation, and it was on his book called The Isms. And if you've never read that book, or if you've never read that book, I would consider taking a look at it and reading it, because there's just so many tips and tricks in there, and just so many just amazing things that he writes in that book that you should really take a look at. And one of those like tips that he had in there, one of the isms was there's always a better way. And I've always kind of like took that with me and said there's always a better way to accomplish whatever you want. And so like each of these positions, I always said like there's always a better way. And that's like kind of where my motivation comes from, because if you're running a webinar and you have 50 registrants, well, why didn't we get 100? There's got to be a way to like do
Right.
something better, no matter what. Like when you're satisfied with something, then you probably need to ask yourself that question and say, hey, like, is there a better way? And then there's probably is, and then just start like thinking about how you can achieve like your next goal. Even if like for me, like losing weight, like you get down and you're like just thinking about losing weight, and then you get down to a goal of 10 pounds. Well, like there's a better way now that to get down another 10. So, that's how I've kind of always like lived my life and my career off of, is that ism book.
Right. And by the way, what you're really speaking to when you talk about there's got to be a better way is a spirit of open-mindedness. You're
Hmm.
open-minded to doing something new. I mean, a better way is in itself doing something new. And successful people who do well with change are those that have that attitude, Jake. I mean, I think that I always think back to Tiger Woods. He was the number one golfer in the world, and this is early in his career, but he had probably been I don't know the exact dates, but it was probably 4, 5, 6 years, since he won the 97 Masters, which was his
Hmm.
first, major, and he changes his swing. Okay.
Oh, all
So
the time.
why would if you're the number one player in the world and you're winning, okay, consistently, why would you go ahead and change your swing? Because
His
he
body's
thought,
getting older.
well, his body was getting older, but he also thought that there could be a better way. He
Better
could
way.
be a better way to maybe protect his body. That may not
Exactly.
have worked out so well, but there
Yeah,
may have been a better way for he felt he could get better at what he was doing.
that's a good
And
point, because you think about like the best basketball players, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, some of these all-time greats, like people always ask him in the summer, like what are you going to work on to improve? And there's always an answer, because there's always a better way for them. There's always a better way, and there's always a way for them to improve. And that relates to anybody, and that relates to me in my career. Is there was always a way to improve, and there always is.
right.
I'll always have that mindset, 10, 15 years from now, 20 years, like maybe even when I'm retired, there's going to be something where I want to do. Maybe, hopefully I'm still playing golf when I'm 65, 70, and still thinking like there's a better way that I can play the game of golf and, shoot, break 90, hopefully.
Right, right, exactly. But that open mindedness reminds me a little bit also of just having a natural curiosity. There's got to be a better way. Well, what's the better way? You got to go investigate that, and that that curiosity. And I just finished a biography about Leonardo da Vinci, who, based on the biography and based on other things I've read, he may have to be the most curious person who ever lived in terms of just all of the. I mean, we think of, at least I thought of him as mainly someone who was an artist who I knew also had as some engineering capability, because I'm very familiar with kind of his resume in terms of being able to help from a military standpoint. But I didn't realize just how many other areas of interest that he just investigated across all these different disciplines.
Right.
And they kind of labeled him like the most curious person ever. And that it named, and amazingly, he was obviously able to stay employed, work in a lot of different ways, make money different ways, because he was able to do so many different things. And you think about, we have change may not have occurred as great at a pace that it does now back in the late 1400s, early 1500s. However, the changes that were happening at that time could be drastic in terms of how the impact on your life. I mean, just in terms of the technology changes that were happening at that time. And so how important it was for him, if he didn't have that curiosity, we may not be talking about Da Vinci today,
Right. Right. I know.
so
It's
so
amazing.
it's just I think that's just an interesting kind of point, to bring up. Um, you know, you've talked about the routine earlier. I want to go back to that for a second, because I have a question on here. Is like, how can a routine help you and hurt you when adapting to changes? Um, you know, obviously, I mean, Steve Jobs used to talk about it. I mean, he had a routine. He obviously wore essentially the same type of clothing, a black turtleneck or a black mock turtleneck every day. So he didn't have to think about things. So that's great. It can make you more efficient having that routine. However, a routine can also hurt you if you get so used to it that when you do have to change, you really fight that change. What are your thoughts about that? And maybe you have a story from that, from your kind of career, that might relate to it.
Yeah. I've always been in a field or career where the routine was just never really a routine. It's so like I'm almost kind of backwards because working in sports every day was different. So like one day, it might have been game day, and then the next day it might be a photo shoot. Then the following day after that, it was sit in your office and work on game notes. Every week was just so different in sports. Like I never have been able to like settle down and get in a routine until I actually maybe jumped over to like the corporate setting. The routine there was, um, you wake up, you go into the office, you work 8 to 5, you have an hour lunch. And then every day, as you get deeper into your position, the longer you're there, you realize you're doing certain tasks on certain days. So you do get in a routine in the corporate setting. But I almost started off not having a routine at all in the sports industry, especially in sports information, because every day was so different. I mean, of course, I guess you could say you get in a routine where you know what days you have games. So, like baseball, you'd always have like a midweek and then a weekend series. Football was game day on Saturday. So, that is a bit of a routine there. But in terms of like the tasks that you're accomplishing every day, it's never the same in sports information. But then you get into the corporate setting, you do get into routine. So it was completely kind of flipped on me. And now I'm like in this like kind of corporate setting where the routine is there. But I try to make my days not a routine, if that makes sense. So I try to like break things up and do something different. Like instance for today, I was helping out our sales team with some LinkedIn messaging. Like that's something that's typically outside of my routine. And I think that's the best case scenario for anybody, because anybody that gets in a routine, they get used to it. And then, when it, like you said, like once you get out of that routine, then all of a sudden you're kind of thrown off. But if you're already used to not being in a routine, then you can't relate to that. So, I guess that's kind of my mindset. I've never really thought about that until I just said it,
Well,
but I do like to not be in a routine, if that makes any sense. But I guess in some degree I am in a routine, but at the same time I'm not. if
well,
I'm
no, but
if I'm confusing anyone.
no, but it sounds like to me that sports was really, especially being in sports information, actually has prepared you really well for kind of adapting to changes through the rest of your career because of the fact that it was not a typical routine. There's probably, like you said, there were certain things that were routine. Baseball was played, you had a series midweek and you had a series on the weekend, but it wasn't a typical type of job that you were kind of working 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 or something like that. And that the changes that would go on from day to day with your routine or lack thereof really helps prepare you for things that just are going to be different. Especially again, you got called on today to help sales with something. Marketing's job is to enable sales. Okay. So, even though that's something that you don't normally do, of course you're going to say, I can help. And of course you need to help because sales is what's driving, sales is paying your paycheck.
And
And you're going to help there. And,
yeah,
and there's probably other things that sales may ask you to do that are not part of your normal job description.
exactly. And I think like when we talk about routine, it also applies to, things outside of work. So, I've learned to deal with pressure. So pressure is another like word that you can think about. As you think about having pressure, meeting deadlines, everything that's non-work related. So if you have something that you need to accomplish, if your kid's birthday is coming up and you're late on buying a gift or something, let's just say that, like I don't feel that pressure. I just make it happen. Like I might need to break your routine, so to speak. And maybe hey, if I have to go shopping at midnight, I'll go shopping at midnight. Like it's just like that's just who I am. I just never had like a routine, and I'm able to like maybe just make adjustments and just go through your day to day. Like I just kind of take my day to day as it comes, and I try not to think of a routine because I don't think that's a good way to live, honestly.
Well, I think that's really good feedback, Jake, for the audience. Well, two of the main things that I heard you talk about today that I think are important just to remind everybody about. One is resilience, and is the idea that all those kind of incremental changes that you had to adapt to while you were playing sports in college, for example, really helped provide you, some resilience. But it also shows that you can kind of practice those things to stay sharp so that you're prepared to adapt to changes. The second element is your continuous focus on learning. Learning just prepares you for when change occurs. One, you're going to know more, but two, you're also going to be able to know that you have the mindset and you have the capability to learn how to deal with this change, which puts you ahead of others who may be fighting to change longer because they just don't want to deal with it. Is there
Right.
anything else from our conversation that you would want to tell our audience about how you've kind of adapted to changes successfully through your career and life, for that matter?
Boy, there's just so many things. Like I'm just trying to think of an example outside of my career. It would probably have to be the move from Ohio to Atlanta. Sorry, I was thinking Alabama. So I moved
You've
from
already forgotten your
yeah,
Atlanta
and
roots here.
I know. So, I loved Atlanta when I lived there. I lived there for 6 years, but I moved from Ohio to Atlanta in 2014. Yeah, 2014. Lived there for 6 years, and just that move was, a big change. That was, but talking about routines, that was a big thing that was not, breaking a routine, so to speak. It's, adapting to a new lifestyle. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know, my surroundings. I didn't even know how to get to the grocery store when I moved
Right.
down here. I was Googling everything. So that was a big change for me. It was a big, big chance I took in my career. I moved down here, moved down to the South for a career change. And, I didn't know anybody. My friends and family were all in Ohio. Nobody was in Atlanta. So, it was a big change. And that was a big moment where I kind of grew up, so to speak, in a different way. You're on your own. You have a job. You're paying rent at the time. You're paying all your bills. You're on your own for the first time. I can't go to my mom's and dad's for dinner on a Sunday night if I want to. So like everything you're doing, you're on
Right.
your own. And you don't. And I didn't know anybody, so it's not like I had a friend that I could reach out and say, "Hey, I really need to come over and hang out with you tonight." Like, so that was a big big moment for me.
Absolutely. And they talk about moving is one of the most stressful things that you can do in your life. And when you did it the way you did it, without knowing anybody down here and not having anybody that you could just pop over to dinner on Sunday night or something like that, that is a challenge. But you obviously rose to that challenge. And I think that'll help you probably for the rest of your life. I mean, you're not going to be intimidated by anything, because that's probably one of the biggest changes you've ever had in your life.
Yeah, it was a big change. I mean, when you take road trips with the ice hockey team and you go to Alaska for a weekend, it's 4 days, but then you're coming home.
Right.
I'm not coming home when I moved to Atlanta with all my stuff packed in my car. You're not coming back. So it's a different mindset when you're driving 10 hours down south thinking like, this is my life now. I'm not going back.
Definitely.
It's completely
Definitely.
different.
Well, Jake, this has been immensely helpful, a great conversation. I think our audience will find it very interesting and engaging. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah,
Really
thanks.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, once again, this has been another edition of Adaptive Changes video series on how to adapt to a change successfully. We were pleased to have Jake Dorow with us today, and we look forward to having an interesting interview next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.